Wait a second. Oh, damn it. Yeah, that's a repro. Hey everybody, and welcome to How To with Soren. Today we are looking at a HeartGold reproduction, which I didn't know at the time of the recording. I was intending to do a video game repair with these games that I acquired from someone who had a flood at their house and they got rid of a bunch of electronics, and I decided to pick up the games to see if they would work. With this one it didn't work, obviously, because it's a reproduction, but I did get some of the actual Nintendo games that they had to work, which I'll show you later on in the video. So to get started, you're going to need something that's pointy, preferably not sharp, but definitely pointy because there's a little gap in between the front part of the cartridge and the back part of the cartridge where you want to insert something, preferably metallic, that won't bend into there to pry up the front of the cartridge. You do want to make sure that if you're doing this with one of your games, it's definitely a game that does not work at all, because this can damage it. But if it's a game that doesn't work, period, it's not that big of a deal. You can try to repair it. It's better than nothing. I also want to say that I'm not an expert at this. I do this just to repair games that I get a hold of for cheap. And so take this all with a grain of salt and be careful with your own games. So once you get that initial corner pulled up, you should be able to go ahead and run your fingernail across the bottom part where the prongs are and separate it from the back. But once you start coming up the sides like this, you're going to need something pointy again to give you a little bit of leverage. It is pretty well secured along here, and you are kind of separating the plastic, and it can be a little bit tricky. So take it slow, go easy with it. There's going to be a little bit of manhandling it, but you definitely want to be careful not to break or bend the casing. I do feel like the original Nintendo games are a little bit easier to open than reproductions. Usually I don't feel like I have as much case damage as is shown here, but what are you gonna do? Yep, there's the reproduction. You can see it's pretty grimy. Obviously these games were in quite the puddle of water, and there's a lot of dirt and damage and things that you wouldn't normally find in a Nintendo game. So I clean off my games with isopropyl alcohol, just regular rubbing alcohol on a Q-tip. And I go through and I clean all the little crevices, anywhere that I feel like there's dirt or maybe debris that I can't see, and I just go through and clean off everything, starting with the case. Once I'm done with the case, I'll get a new Q-tip with more alcohol on it, and I'll go ahead and rub down all the pieces on the motherboard, usually starting with the side with the prongs. On this one, I think it might be because it was a reproduction, but there were quite a few spots on it that just would not come off, and I don't know if that was rust or if that was something to do with the flood, but it just would not come off of the motherboard. things not coming off of the motherboard is not a typical thing with the Nintendo games. Usually I can get those sparkling clean, and I think that's because Nintendo uses a lot better quality in materials when they make their games, and the reproduction companies obviously want to go as cheap as possible. Usually these prongs I can get to a point where they're shining and bright. On this one I obviously couldn't. When you put it back into the casing after you're finished cleaning, you want to make sure that you get the prongs on the right side of the case so that it can be read. Usually it will not go back into the case properly if you don't do this. Now here's a game that I got from the same lot that was in the flooding, and it also did not work, but I went ahead and cleaned it with the same process that I showed you. Unfortunately, I did not show it not working beforehand, but this is what it looks like after I cleaned it, and I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to seal the games back up using this one. I usually use super glue. I get it from the dollar store in about a 4-pack in these small bottles, and it works really well. I don't waste as much. And you just want to go around the outside of the case and dab a little bit of glue here and there and try not to glue yourself or the motherboard. And you just want to do the 2 sides and the top. You don't want to do the bottom. And then you want to get the case back as quickly as possible so that it doesn't dry without it. Hold it together for a few seconds, and usually that does it. Now if you want to, if you're fast enough, you can go around the outside edges with some more isopropyl alcohol and try to get off any leaked super glue. I'm usually not fast enough for this, but you can go ahead and try. You could also try to take a razor blade to the glue if you wanted, but I don't usually do this. It shouldn't impede function of the game unless it's in a large glob that prevents it from going into the DS, or if it's on the prongs. Now I'm going to go over a side-by-side comparison of reproductions and originals. On the right hand side I have an original HeartGold version, and on the left I have the reproduction. The first thing I want to point out is that it's got this Nintendo printed above the prongs, whereas the original does not have that. Now for this next bit I want to show you, we're going to have to turn up the light a little bit so you can see it. There we go. Now if you look at the top, right there, there's an indentation in the top of the video game, and that is a clear indication that it is not a reproduction. Now the next thing I want to show you is the color of the game. You notice that one is gray and one is black. The originals are always black. They only printed HeartGold version in black. They never did gray, they never did any other color. So if it's something other than black, that's a big indication. Also to note, there is a lot of cover damage on the one that's a reproduction, but you can clearly see a few details that I'd like to point out. The first is that this symbol here, the logo, is not evenly spaced. There's white at the top, but nothing at the bottom. Whereas if you look at the original product, it's very crisp, it's very clear. The logo has a nice white border all the way around it, very even. And lastly, the biggest indication, although maybe not the best indication, is that there is no genuine Nintendo logo on the motherboard. In fact, there doesn't really seem to be any logo on the motherboard. There's a Nintendo print, but it's unofficial. There's no circle around it, nothing. However, if you look at a genuine Nintendo game, you can see that nice, beautiful Nintendo logo right there at the bottom, printed in gold, circled. And there also seems to be quite a bit fewer parts going on here. The prongs are nice and golden, very shiny, but the biggest indication is that Nintendo logo. Lastly, I want to give you guys a comparison list so you can see each of these indications side by side. I do want to say that most of these are going to be HeartGold and SoulSilver specific, although some of them will cross over into other games as well. And that's it. If this video was helpful for you, please consider leaving a like, maybe subscribe if you want to see more, and let me know how your own video game repair went in the comments. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.